In a bid to power the actualization of the UN goals and the African Union Agenda of 2063, African women converged in Abuja for the launch of the Nigeria chapter of the African Leaders Network, AWLM, a movement aimed at encouraging increased women's participation in politics, peace building, and also mentorship of young women leaders through intergenerational dialogues and platforms. We have the report.
Gender discrimination still remains a problem all countries, including the most advanced one, are battling with, though in different degrees. Women are still considered the inferior gender in most parts of the world, and as such are routinely denied even the most basic of rights. In many countries, girls are denied the benefits of education, right to work, while as women they are barred or find it difficult to access key positions in government or private organizations by entrenched cultural, political, or institutional barriers. Yet, it has been generally agreed that to accelerate transition towards more sustainable and equitable growth, in line with the Sustainable Development Goals objectives of leaving no one behind, it is critical to integrate women into national development and decision-making process. Indeed, while achieving gender equality and women's empowerment is Goal 5 of the SDGs, it is also part of all the other goals, with many targets specifically recognizing women's equality and empowerment as both the objectives and as part of the solution. The need to bridge this gap necessitated the decision of global leaders to dedicate standalone goals in the now rested Millennium Development Agenda and the successor framework tagged the Sustainable Development Goals.
As members of African Women Leadership Network Nigeria, you will be individually and collectively challenged to provide leadership to the attainment of SDG Goals 5 on gender equality and empowerment of women and girls. With the caliber of personality and the steering committee, I have no doubt in my mind that you do justice to this enormous task at hand. As a country, we must prioritize the issue of women's social economic problems and to bridge the gap of inequalities. We must promote also the child education maximally and reduce maternal deaths.
The UN entity for gender equality and empowerment, UN Women, had even before the inception of the SDGs in 2014 initiated a global He-for-She campaign with the aim of ending gender inequality and create tangible changes. The campaign is aimed at engaging men and boys as agents of change by encouraging them to take action against gender inequality. The campaign's central message is that gender inequality is not only a women's issue, but a human rights issue. Globally, over 1.4 million men have joined the He-for-She movement to date. The initiative was launched in Nigeria by Vice President Yemi Osinbajo in Abuja on 23 May 2017. Even though different strategies have been mapped out over the years to address the gaps, the United Nations has, however, found it even more compelling to galvanize leading women under the auspices of African Women Leaders Network. Like the He-for-She campaign, the African Women Leaders Network seeks to create a platform for high-level engagement of leading women for public advocacy in the movement for achieving gender equality.
The African Women Leaders Network was birthed as a regional platform to galvanize the strength of women's networks across sectors and generations to support realization of the big development agendas, including the AU Agenda 2063 and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. By 2018, it became clear that the establishment of national chapters will be necessary in order to realize the full potential of this network. So to date, 6 national networks have been formed in the Central African Republic, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, in Cameroon, Congo-Brazzaville, Seychelles, and Sierra Leone. So Nigeria today is the next country. I believe 20 more national chapters are planned within the next year. Nigeria is the 7th to be launched. Over the course of the last year, UN Women began to facilitate discussions about the establishment of a national chapter in Nigeria. We consulted with women who were present at the launch, at the global launch in New York and the African Union in Addis, and we also consulted extensively with the Embassy of Germany.
The African Women Leaders Network was birthed in 2017 as a continental network of women leaders and activists from Africa committed to advancing a common vision for women's empowerment and leadership in the development of the continent. The network seeks to galvanize the leadership of African women towards fostering lasting peace and sustainable development in all sectors and at all levels, building on and working with existing women networks in line with Africa Agenda 2063 and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development.
The AWLF, at its core, is a platform that recognizes and embraces the diversity of existing women's networks. In other words, it's not replacing existing networks, but it's actually bringing on board or bringing together all the existing networks. Its mission is to bring these different formations of women's networks together around a common agenda. In this way, you can see AWLF as a glue that unites women's networks in all their diversity around the common purpose of advancing gender equality in Nigeria. This is intended to make the women's movement in Nigeria stronger and also better able to withstand the pushback that is threatening not just here in Nigeria but globally, as we've seen, to unravel many of the gains that have been made in recent decades.
This year's call for action is to champion the course of women's socio-economic and political development in Nigeria. The United Nations Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, and the Executive Director of the UN Women, Phumzile Mlambo Nguka, called for increased women participation in politics and adequate representation across all leadership positions. They charged African women to ensure active contribution in the peace-building process, transformation, and stability of their countries.
Your launch today is an important milestone along the path to achieving women's empowerment and gender equality in Nigeria and beyond. 2 years ago this very month, I was honored to join forces with the African Union and the UN Women to facilitate the birth of the Africa Women Leaders Network. Soon after, we undertook a joint solidarity mission to the Democratic Republic of Congo and Nigeria. The mission helped to highlight the crucial need for women's participation in peace and security processes and in politics as a whole. We know this is key to building sustainable development for all. Your launch today could not come at a better time. Next year, we will mark 5 years since world leaders adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has emphasized that achieving the 2030 Agenda and Africa's Agenda 2063 requires a strong focus on inclusivity with a special emphasis on mainstreaming women's rights and gender equality across prevention and mediation work. In Nigeria, your new chapter is an important platform to help realize the Sustainable Development Goals by increasing women's meaningful participation in all areas of decision-making and by extending advice and support at the federal and state levels to prioritize gender considerations. Working in partnership with other national chapters of the African Women Leaders Network in the Lake Chad Basin region, all of you can serve as strong advocates towards increasing women's representation in peace and security in Nigeria and the region. As we know, this launch comes on the heels of Nigeria's general elections, which saw a further dwindling in the numbers of women elected into political office. This unfortunate development only serves to make your leadership and voice even more critical, even more necessary, as you support women's networks and galvanize national and international efforts to reverse the regression in women's political representation. The African Women's Leaders Network shows what is possible when women work together across different organizations, sectors, regions, and affiliations towards a common vision. I urge all of you to use this chapter in 3 specific ways. First, harness the energies and experiences and the leadership potential of women's networks across the country. Second, coalesce around common priorities and challenges that are facing women in Nigeria. Third, propose solutions that work for women and girls. As you do so, do all you can to make sure your network is as wide and inclusive as possible, bringing in women, young and old, rural and urban, and all those who might find themselves on the margins, including women with disabilities and those in internally displaced camps. Every Nigerian woman should see their experiences, their hopes, aspirations, and their dreams in the values and the agenda championed by this important network. Once again, congratulations to the women of Nigeria for taking this bold step. I look forward to working with all of you as you continue building this movement for transformative change.
In a welcome address and introduction of the steering committee of the network, the United Nations Women Council representative, Comfort Lamte, told the gathering that to champion this course, so far with Nigeria chapter being the 7th network to be launched, 6 national networks have been formed in Central African Republic, Democratic Republic of Congo, Cameroon, Congo-Brazzaville, Seychelles, and Sierra Leone, with an additional 20 more planned to be launched within a year. Speakers at the launch, whose voices were further amplified by that of the First Lady and wife of the President, Her Excellency, Dr. Mrs. Aisha Muhammad Buhari, represented by Ms. Hajo Sani, called on the President to, in usual fatherly gesture, consider the appointment of competent women into his new cabinet.
As you are all aware, Her Excellency Dr. Mrs. Aisha Muhammad Buhari, the First Lady of Nigeria, has been very passionate about women and to get more women into the leadership position. As you will recall, in the last general election, Her Excellency succeeded in initiating women and youth presidential campaign team, whereby women played great and very, very significant role towards the success of the general election, and specifically for bringing Mr. President back as the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. In that regard, we believe that, Mr. President, it is only fair if in this present dispensation of the second term, Nigerian women are brought on board to be major stakeholders in terms of being part of the decision making they are supposed to be.
The United Nations Resident Coordinator in Nigeria, Edward Kalun, adding his voice as a he for she, maintained that considering the appointment of competent women into different leadership positions is critical in reshaping the society.
Despite the well-documented positive impact of women and women's organizations, progress on women's participation and leadership in politics and peace process is still lagging. The 2019 general election did not help the situation either. Now the statistics are talking about less than 5% of women's participation in parliament. This is not acceptable for this giant of Africa called Nigeria. Without gender equality, there is not going to be any development in Nigeria. And I know we are now at the political heartbeats of politics. There's a lot of horse trade going on, but I want to end by calling on President Buhari that in his solitary decision of the next cabinet to consider competent women to hold
Princess Orelokpe Adefulire, in her goodwill message, which entirely underscored the role of her mandate in actualizing Goal 5 of the SDGs, challenged the African Women Leaders Network members to individually and collectively provide leadership in the attainment of SDGs Goal 5 on gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls.
Discrimination against women and limitation on being a thing of the past, and that's one of the agenda of the steering committee. I want to also say we should pay attention to how we can mobilize women together for this leadership role. Women succeeding together, we can only succeed together. if we are united. And we must be united to fight this and to achieve this.
The African Union missions in Nigeria, the ECOWAS, and other stakeholders in their various speeches threw their weight behind the call for the actualization of the 35% affirmative action for women in Nigeria.
For us at African Union, women are not only at the center of development, but are central to the development of the continent. And so the African Union places very high premiums on the issues of women. That is why the African Union Agenda 2063, aspiration number 6, places specific emphasis on Africa. Most development is people-driven, relying on the potential offered by people, especially these women and youth, and caring for the children.
We are committed to Agenda 2030 of the United Nations. We are committed to the African Union Agenda 2063, which talks about the Africa we want, and certainly the Nigeria we want. And also we are committed to the United Nations Security Resolution 1325. These are some of our global defining agendas which inform some of the work that we are doing. In our call for action, we said that we are concerned about the pervasive and deeply entrenched discrimination against women and girls in Nigeria. And we said that this is reflected in the low representation of women in leadership and decision-making positions, the disproportionate impact of conflict and insecurity on women and girls, the exclusion of women and girls from peace-making building and conflict resolution processes, and the high prevalence of violence against women and girls, including early child marriage and female genital mutilation, amongst others. We also said that in our aim to find an action for the next 1 year, we're going to harness the wealth of Nigerian women experiences in leadership and use the contributions to seek a transformative agenda, one that builds stability in Nigeria towards the realization of the goals of the Nigerian National Gender Policy and all the global commitments that we have made.
The launch also had an interactive panel discussion tagged "The Transformation Women Want, Galvanizing for a Common Agenda," with focus on outcome of the 2019 elections, improving women's participation in politics, leadership, decision-making, and strengthening the agenda setting role of women, with the wife of Ekiti State Governor Erelu Bisi Fayemi moderating the session. The high-profile launch, which was powered by UN Women in collaboration with the Office of the Senior Special Assistant to the President on SDGs, African Union, and Embassy of Germany, had in attendance heads of UN systems in Nigeria, Norwegian and German ambassadors to Nigeria, wife of the former Senate President, wife of state governors of Ekiti and Kebbi, the First Lady of Nigeria, who was represented by her Senior Special Assistant, Hajo Sani, as well as women representatives from the House of Representatives and other stakeholders.